Good morning, my empowered empath warriors. Welcome to the Self Empowered Empath Podcast. Okay, so I just wanted to briefly interject here and just say that this podcast is actually, it used to be in the Superconscious Success podcast, and I decided to create this as its own individual podcast to be able to help go with the brand of the Self Empowered Empath. And so that you'll know that the content that you receive in this particular podcast is going to be related to empaths. It's going to be related to narcissistic abuse and energy vampires and codependency and powering up as that empath you are designed to be. So if you find reference within the podcast, or if you're wondering why it's sort of like, says something about Superconscious Success, that is the reason why. If you haven't yet checked out Superconscious Success podcast, though, definitely go ahead and do that. That's got some great spirituality podcast episodes you may be interested in. This particular podcast, this is a podcast of mine and Terra Bundance's, and we are here to help you to power up as that empath you are designed to be. With both of us having struggled with codependency and other, issues being around narcissists throughout our lifetime, then it has really opened our eyes, and it's really something we are very passionate about. So I just wanted to interject here before we get into this episode, and I look forward to seeing you in future episodes. After a number of these are done, and I've actually converted them all across to the Self Empowered Empath, then we will start our official Self Empowered Empath podcast, where we will interview guests, but also we will do individual episodes, as I've just done one of my own on codependency. And this podcast is going to have either individual episodes with myself and Terra, or there's going to be joint episodes. There's lots of incredible content on its way for you. Okay, thanks so much for joining us today, and I will catch you later. Bye. Hey there, Superconscious Success fam. Welcome back to another episode of our Self Empowered Empath segment with my good friend Lisa Campion, who unfortunately is unable to be with us tonight. But in this segment, Lisa and I aim to guide you towards being the powered up empath that's free of codependency, narcissistic abuse, and exposure to energy vampires. Now it's time for us to power up, and we are here to help you do just that. Now, I'm so excited to have our guest on the Self Empowered Empath segment today. Like I said, Lisa's unable to be here, but I'm looking forward to chatting to Samantha Fey, an intuitive for over 15 years, as well as a self-professed empath. She's the host of 2 podcasts, Psychic Teachers and Enlightened Empaths, and her mission is to teach people to embrace their true gifts and to help people to see their connection to spirit. Now, in today's episode, I'm going to be really getting Samantha to break down what being an empath is all about and how we can harness this gift instead of constantly seeing it as a curse. Now, Samantha's just written a book, The Awake Dreamer, and if we're lucky, we're going to go a little bit into that towards the end of this podcast. So now let's welcome Samantha onto the show. Hey, Samantha, how you doing today?
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited. I have listened to a number of your segments of your podcast and have thoroughly enjoyed them because you co-host that, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah. So
yes, I co-host Psychic Teachers with Deb Bowen and Enlightened Empaths with Denise Carell. It's nice to have a buddy, isn't it?
Oh, it's so good to have these buddies that we can have podcast interviews with, and we can collaborate with, and we can help to co-create what we're wanting to put out there. So I totally agree. But I absolutely loved your podcast. I thought it was some incredible content in there. And so today I actually want to take you through what being an empath's all about and how we can start to harness that, because sometimes we can sort of start seeing it as a bit of a curse, when in actual fact it's such a powerful gift. But before we do that, how about, can you go through your story and tell us your story as to how you've gotten to where you are today?
Sure. So I never started really thinking of myself as an empath until about 10 years ago, well into my intuitive journey, because I always feel that, I don't know, I like to just be very grounded and normal and hit the ground running and focus on my emotions in my journal, but not, crying all over the place with everyone else. So it took me a long time to realize and recognize that I am an empath. And it helped me to understand that there are different kinds of empaths, different levels. It's a spectrum. And so that was very, very helpful. But I started out my journey kind of just ignoring my intuition and definitely my empathy, which I think is very hard to do. But I think I worked very hard and accomplished it for a good number of years. And then I had this really crazy experience when I was teaching at our local community college. I had a student who was really harassing me, and I wasn't getting any help with that at all. So I
Mm.
started praying for help and guidance and assistance. And one day I walked into my office and there was just a red rock on my desk. And I was like, where did this come from? It was a big rock and it was just sitting there and it was all polished. And I thought, well, who would leave this here? So I took it up to our geology professor, Dr. Rocks, and I said, someone just left this in my locked office. And my office wasn't even in the English department. I was a new hire that year. So I was down in the basement. Like no one could find me, which as an empath, I kind of liked.
Yeah. Hmm.
So I had no idea how that rock got there. And he said, whoa, that's Jasper. Who do you need protection from? And I was like, wait, a rock is going to protect me? Come on. Like, I love what you teach, Dr. Rocks, but I'm not buying that. But I still decided to hold that rock with me everywhere I went and continued to ask for guidance and protection with this student. And, you know, at the community college, you can't exactly expel them.
No.
So 2 weeks later, he was arrested on arson charges for a completely unrelated event and never returned to school. And suddenly I was fascinated by rocks. Which led me to study Reiki, which led me to learn meditation, which reopened all of my intuition. And it really did start with my dreams. I started having all these precognitive dreams. I had these experiences that I call my astral school dreams, where I was
Mhm.
going to school in my dreams and learning how to send and receive healing, how to do readings, how to
Wow.
transform energy, all sorts of really amazing things. And I kept taking classes and studying with people and reading books. And the people I was meeting at these classes, they just they just weren't like me. You know,
Mm.
I was a mom. I had 3 young girls. I was in charge of, you know, the kindergarten class. I was the volunteer mom. I was in a prayer group. I was in a rosary group. I just couldn't find people that were like resonating with that grounded side of my life until I met my dear friend Deb Bowen. And I said, we need to find more people like us, you know, just
Yeah.
grounded, everyday, normal people who are going to work and doing laundry and taking
Hmm.
care of families and not worrying about all this, I don't know, elevated, am I in the fifth dimension stuff?
Yeah.
And she said, well, when you find them, let me know. And so that's how we started our Psychic Teachers podcast. I was like, we will find them, we'll find them together. And sure enough, we did. Our listeners are just amazing.
Yeah. It's so cool once you start all of this and you start to build those connections. And I believe I was put here, my purpose is that of connection. So I like to connect with other people. I like other people to connect with each other, but also my whole purpose is to help people to connect to their higher selves, which is so powerful once they learn how to do that. And some of the people that come into your life when you just let things go and when you just start to really do that healing, that us as empaths, we have quite a lot of healing to do, because a lot of it comes from our childhood. That's kind of moved on and barreled on as we've gone throughout life. So, I want to delve into some of those aspects as we go through. But for those that, firstly, I want to ask, how did the rock get here? Was that part of divine? We know that there are situations where things have just appeared out of nowhere. As we would say in the third dimension, we know very differently. But so did you ever find out, or did you just leave
No.
it to source and just go, you know what, this was a protection for me? And you started to piece things together once this guy was obviously arrested.
Yeah. No, I definitely tried to find out. I mean, I
Yeah.
asked the cleaning crew, I asked the custodian, I asked everyone around me. No one fessed up to it.
Yeah.
And I really don't know how it got there because, like I said, I think that office was a storage closet at some point. I mean, it was tucked away in the basement of this community college. I don't know. I've had
Yeah.
that happen one other time. I was collecting angel stones, all the stones that are said to help you connect with your angel, like seraphonite,
Yep.
celestite, angelite, selenite. And the only one I couldn't find was petalite. And I woke up one morning and there was a petalite sitting at my bedside table.
Yeah. And I know things have happened to me as well where things have just appeared out of the blue and I've gone, how the heck has this gotten here? And it's something that I've been asking for. I mean, we know that manifestation, this is how things can happen, if you're open to it. And so, yeah, I was just curious as to whether maybe you had found out, but I think that it was a message from the divine that you're
Yeah,
protected.
right.
And so awesome. But before we go on, can we let our listeners know a little bit about what an empath is and how an empath actually differs from a highly sensitive person? Because they are two slightly different terms.
They are slightly different. I do think a highly sensitive person can be an empath.
Yep.
And sometimes an empath can be highly sensitive, but there are subtle differences. An empath is someone who just feels the emotions of everyone around them. And some you do have plant empaths and nature empaths and
Yeah.
animal empaths. But in an overall quick answer to that question, empaths feel the emotions of people, places, and things. So you can walk into a room and pick up if it's tense or weird. You can, my kids who are teenagers now, it's so
Mine
hard for
too.
them. They'll come home and be like, "What happened?" And they're like, "Nothing, nothing." Something happened at school today. And they're like, "Darn it, mom." So we can always see what people are trying to hide.
Yeah.
We see behind the masks that we tend to wear. And it can be really hard, especially as children, because as a child, if you sense that there's like tension between your parents or they had a fight, but when they see you in the kitchen in the morning, they're like, "Hello, good morning." As
Mm.
a little empath, you feel that difference there.
Yeah.
And what happens to kids is they'll ask their parents, like, "Mommy, what's wrong?" "Nothing, nothing, honey, nothing." And the
Yeah.
child believes, his or her parents, and they're like, "Oh, I must be wrong." And so we tend to start to dampen that down, or how it also manifests is we don't trust ourselves. And
Yeah.
that can take a long time, I feel, to overcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that as parents, because we want to protect our kids, that we hide behind that mask that everything's perfect and everything's fine and I've made it, there's kind of that fine line between, okay, you don't want to put all your problems onto your kids, but you want them to know that you're human. You want them to
Right.
know that you've also got feelings, you've also got emotions. I've had no issue with, crying in front of my kids and
Right.
my kids feeling that that something was going on. Not bringing them into it, but they'd come up and they go, "You okay, mum?" And I would say, "Look, I'm just having a little bit of a hard time today, but I'll be okay and I'll work through it." And this is what I think us as empath mothers in particular, or anybody that's sort of like staying at home with the kids, we experience these emotions on such a deep level. And I think it's really tough sometimes, at least in my situation. I found it can be tough being a parent and being an empath as well, because empaths have a real hard time setting boundaries. And so you said you've got 3 teenagers. My kids are 18 and 20, so I know exactly what you're talking about. But how do you see the issue of boundary setting and that with empaths?
To me, it all comes down to honesty and authenticity,
Yeah.
and I think as parents, we have to model for children how to be that, how to experience and explore our emotions without, as you said, bringing them into it. So there are days when I'll say to my kids, "I'm in a really cranky mood and I don't know why. So
Mm.
I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to go to the gym,
Yep.
or I'm going to sit at the dining table and just doodle and paint all day if you want to join me. But just know, heads up, I'm cranky today."
Yeah.
That's good, because I think, because it models for them that it's okay for them to be in a bad mood.
Yeah.
I've
Absolutely.
tried to teach them, if you're in a bad mood, don't pick a fight with your sister.
Uh,
Just say, "I'm in a bad mood, and let's think of something that you can do around that." One thing that helped me a lot as a mom was having a lot of structure, not like, you have to do this, or, we have to do this, but I would try very hard to have a structured routine, and
Yep.
give my children so many choices within that structured routine, if that makes
Nice.
sense.
Nice.
So
So
like
So you'd
one of the
structure it
examples I
out, but
always
then you would give them the choices between what you were structuring so that they could make these choices themselves. And another segment of my podcast is actually about conscious parenting. And that sounds like a perfect conscious parenting example where we allow our kids to be their own people. We allow our kids to make their own choices and to also deal with the consequences that may pop up from those choices. Because as an empath, one of the things that we struggle with is the whole concept of feeling like we need to keep our kids happy all the time, that we need to keep everybody happy, that we're real people pleasers. And so I think that this is something as a parent, if we can learn to just go, okay, they're going to fall, as conscious parenting says, there's going to be times that they're going to fall. There's going to be times that they're going to struggle, and we have to allow them to work through that. So what do you think about that whole aspect when it comes to conscious parenting and empathy and that sort of thing?
Well, I think it's just very important to let your children know that you love them unconditionally.
Yeah.
And so we've had a lot of conversations about that. And my kids know what I always say to them, if they come home with like a bad grade or something, I never say like, did you not study enough? Do we have to get a tutor? I'll just say, did you do your best?
Yeah.
Does this work exemplify your best efforts? If so, no big deal. It's one grade. When you're my age, you won't even remember sitting in that class.
Yeah.
But if you didn't, if that's not your best, then we need to talk.
Yeah, exactly.
So I try really hard to let them know that, they are always unconditionally loved no matter what they do, say, think, or feel, no matter what choice.
And I think that's fantastic. And I think that the problem in today's society is that we're so focused on, on grades. We're so focused on how, we worry so much about where our kids are going to be going and what they're going to be doing and how they're going to be succeeding. And because this whole concept of competition and everything else. So I think it's great if we can learn to just go, you know what, let's live in the present. And this is what I try to explain to the kids. It's important that we live in the present, and we just enjoy our life as we're going along without worrying too much.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's important as an empath to be able to explain that, and to be able to also explain to your kids that it's all about feeling your feelings, because so many times we are told to squash our feelings. And, and so when we're at school, we're told, you're not to cry or you're not to be angry. The moment you start showing any signs of that, you're put in the corner or you're disciplined for it. So, so I think that's great. I think it's really important that as parents, we learn to really harness their gifts and really harness,
But also to give them outlets for those emotions too.
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do with this emotion? Okay, you're angry, you're upset, you're disappointed, you're happy, you're bored. What are you going to do now? And I think it's really important, especially if you're the mom or dad of an empath, to model for them what to do with those emotions, how to process them, how to get through them.
Yeah. And so
instead of getting mucked in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so how may we know, what are some of the signs that will show us that we are actually empaths, or that our kids are empaths? What will we start to see?
Well, I think when you do have this interior world going on, when you sense things that aren't really visible, such as emotions or energy. Some empaths are drawn to animals and they're little Dr. Doolittles.
Mm-hmm.
Some empaths are drawn to plants and they have a beautiful green thumb. Some of us empaths are drawn to crystals and they just tend to find us and come to us. And so I think that as you start to honor and trust your interior feelings,
Mm-hmm.
and follow where that leads you, you'll be led to the type of empath that you are. But again, number one, I think, is working on overcoming that self-doubt, learning how to trust yourself, trust your emotions, trust your true feelings. And I always tell students who take my classes to please, please, please keep a validation journal.
Yeah.
So that if you're at work and someone new comes and everyone at the office is like, oh my gosh, have you met so-and-so? They're amazing. Da, 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 da. And you meet the new person and you get heads up, warning, yellow light flashing trigger. write that down in your validation journal. And that person might be all smiles and everything's gun-ho wonderful for 3 months. And then maybe a sabotage happens, or they abruptly leave the company, or they take a client with them. You don't have to go around the office going, I knew it, but you can look at your validation journal and start to trust yourself and know, yeah, I kind of sense that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've always said that I've had pretty good instincts when it comes to people, and my husband's been going through a situation at work at the moment where there's this one lady there, and he got along really well with her. She used to be in a different group because my husband's a scientist, so she used to be in a different group, and they used to get along really well. But the first time I met her, there was something about her that did not sit right. I was just like, there's something in my gut. There's the energy. I didn't like the energy. It was really quite strained. And so I kind of mentioned it to him, and I said, look, I know that you two get along, you collaborate, is thing, but be careful of her, because there's something that just is not sitting right. Anyway, time went on, and then he, being the amazing, loving person that he is, she was out of a job. So he went to his boss and said, she'd be a great asset to the company, and have you got a space that you could put her, etc., etc. So she came into the company, and since doing that, she's done a full 180 turn where she's totally turned on him. And it's been a real interesting experience, because now, like he said, now I see
why she helped him. Why would she?
I don't know, but there was something about her. I think there could be some narcissistic qualities in her, but she's turned everybody at that place like she's got nobody that supports her at this place. It's one of those situations, and he says, now I see exactly what you're talking about. Because
now, as a scientist, does he say, wow, your intuition was spot on?
Yeah, pretty much. And
wow.
Yeah, no, look, we've been together, we've been married for 22 years, and I'm actually a naturopath by trade. That's where I started off. So I've got that scientific background as well. But it was interesting, because now he's kind of like gone, how could she do that to me when I actually helped her? I remember going into a meeting one day with her, and my husband and his boss and stuff. And then I came out of that meeting, and I sat in his office and I cried. And he goes, what's wrong? And I said, that was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And I had no idea why, until I realized that it was the energy that she was putting off in that particular space was just so negative. And it totally drained me. By the time I got out of that office, I was drained. And I think that this is something that we can deal with when we're around energy vampires that decide to drain our energy, that decide to attach themselves to us. And so what empaths are known to have, to have these sort of people, the narcissists, come against. And why would the empaths attract these particular energies to them?
It's like two puzzle pieces that fit together. Doesn't it feel that way?
Yeah, totally.
I wonder always, this is a little struggle I have in my head, like the nurture versus nature. I wonder if empaths are born or created, because if you talk to a lot of empaths, most of us were raised with at least one narcissistic parent. And I know for me, being raised with one narcissistic parent, I had to be forever tuned into my mom's emotions.
Yeah.
So that I would know in the morning, is this going to be a good day or is this not going to be a good day?
Yeah.
And I think having to be tuned into the emotions, I could tell from a twitch of her mouth or the way she poured her coffee if she was in a good mood or a bad mood. And I think that's what brought out my empathy. It made it even stronger. And if you grow up with a narcissist, it's just programmed into you to please them. Keep the peace, keep the peace, keep the peace. And so you tend to just recreate that throughout your life because it's familiar. It's what you know. And until we heal that within ourselves, we're going to keep attracting that. Also, empaths just tend to be very kind people.
Yeah.
Like we take things very personally. We take things very hard. We carry things with us a lot longer than we should. I mean, I'll read, like, this is such a silly example, but I remember years ago, I read Kite Runner when it came out. That
Okay.
book affected me so badly that I would pray for that, well, two of those characters, and I would like go, oh wait, they're not real, they're fictional.
Yeah.
And one of my friends read Kite Runner for the first time a couple of months ago, and she was like, it was good. And I was like,
Uh,
but Hassan, like, did you not feel for him, like what he went through, and then his son? And she was like, yeah, it was good. And I was like, oh my gosh. So it's
yeah.
shocking sometimes when you realize other people don't feel everything. So like, it's a fiction book, and I have carried the pain of those characters with me. Not really, but you know what
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean.
I know what you mean. I know
And
what you
so I
mean.
think, and so it's hard because I don't want to say like, well, we empaths are so kind, and because some empaths are not that kind,
Yeah.
but we tend to be very tuned into the emotions of others, and we feel better when everything is even and calm and chill.
So
And
so
so
we tend to be the peacekeepers. We
yes,
tend to be the
exactly.
ones that would prefer to just, okay, chill down a little bit. Let's just sort
Yeah.
things out. Let's just calm things down. And sometimes I think the problem with that is that we don't allow the people that are around us to go through their own issues that they need to go through, which leads to common cases of codependency. So if you were to define to my audience what codependency is and why empaths are so, why it's something that we struggle with so much, what would you say?
Well, I think codependency is when you take responsibility for someone else's emotion.
Yeah.
And one of the best books I'd recommend for that is The Four Agreements.
Yeah.
It's a great book.
Love
That
that
one of
book.
those agreements, don't take anything personally. It's not about you. I think that is something all empaths need to learn.
Yep.
I also think that people often perceive empaths as weak
Mm-hmm.
because we feel so deeply, because we don't hide our, behind this mask
And
of
that's
of
why the
providing.
narcissists are attracted to us,
Yes,
because it's
yes, because I
easy.
think they perceive our kindness as a weakness.
Yeah.
And so what a narcissist will do is they'll kind of chip away
Mm.
at the empath, like water wearing down a stone. And so if an empath isn't strong and isn't careful, they can get worn down by that.
Yeah.
I was talking to a friend who's in an unhappy marriage, and she was like, I don't know, like I'm divorced, and she was like, I don't know how you did it. I could never be that strong. And I'm like, strong? Like if something's come to its natural end, like you just,
Yeah. Yeah.
but she's still an empath struggling with some codependent issues, and she was like, no, there's no way I can do it. And I was like,
Yeah.
but you're not happy, so I think people in codependent relationships are completely comfortable putting their own happiness aside
Yeah.
in order to help someone else, to be there, to show up. But we all get fed in some way.
Yeah.
We all get something out of being that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think sometimes there's the martyr complex that comes in with that, which is kind of the darker side of empathy.
Yeah.
And I tend to avoid that type, like people who are like, oh, I volunteer this and this and that, and I show up and I do this and that. What are you doing for you? And
Yeah.
so I do think the empath has to understand the value of sacred selfishness.
Yeah, it's interesting because for 20 years, I've been a parent as you've been a parent for a long time too. And it's just natural for us to put our kids first. It always has been. It's always been about, what can I do to help my kids? How can I help my kids to grow? And my husband's been telling me for at least the last couple of years, you got to start putting yourself first because everything's for the kids. And I said, yeah, I understand that, and I appreciate that. He's very supportive, and so last year, for the entire of last year, I went through a dark night of the soul moment where I was just working on my shadow side. I was just really digging deep and figuring out, where did this come from? What's been going on that's been triggering all of this? What's been going on that's been causing these attachment issues, that's been stopping me from letting go, stopping me from, from coming into my own and powering up as the empath that I am. Yeah, Superconscious Success fam, thanks so much for joining me in this interview. And I'm just taking a short break in the interview just to let you know about an exciting offer that I have for you. I'm just in the process of building the Superconscious Success Inner Circle, which is going to be a free membership that you're going to be able to get access to, which is going to eventually, once I've got it all built up, include courses and exclusive content and a whole heap of other stuff that's going to be available for you to help you to expand that consciousness and to come into your power. And it'll include content from all of my different segments, from Superconscious Success, Your Spiritual Shift, Raising a Conscious Human, and also Peace and Prosperity. And you'll include content from all of that, as well as the Self Empowered Empath, Higher Self Mastery, and a whole heap of other different collaborations and projects I have on the go. However, to get this free membership, you do need to go and sign up. So if you go to superconscioussuccess.com/inner circle, you can sign up absolutely free for it. As the content builds and I reach 1,000 subscribers, I will then be making it a premium product, which means that you will no longer get it for free. It will be a monthly charge. But if you get in now and you get into the free membership, then you will have that free for life. So head across now as we're in the building phase, and you'll start to get more and more awesome content flowing in. And yeah, so head on over there now, superconscioussuccess.com/inner circle. Now let's head on back to the, so I know that empaths struggle a lot with their shadow side, with bringing that to the light, because we like to be seen as people that are kind, and we like to be kind and we like to be loving, but we do all have a side to us that we have to acknowledge, a side to us that comes from our childhood, could come from past lives, could come from you know, a lot of different places. And so the shadow side, I think if we learn to tap into that and we learn to acknowledge it and we learn to work through it, I think it can bring some incredible transformations for the empath to be able to start to power up and to be able to start to set boundaries and that sort of thing. So what sort of, have you had something like a dark night of the soul or something to happen that's just kind of helped you to regain that power? Because I really want empaths to understand that they don't have to be the victim of circumstance. They don't have to be the victim of you know, these narcissists that are around them or these energy vampires. What do you have to say about the dark nights of the soul or the shadow side?
I think the dark nights of the soul are some of the best blessings and gifts we can receive in life. I really, really do.
Me too.
They're incredibly painful and ugly and awful to go through. But in hindsight, you look at it and you go, holy cow, did I grow a ton during that difficult, awful period?
Yeah.
But I do think as what so many empaths do is they tend to ignore, deny, or push down the negative emotions of anger or fear or loneliness or whatever the shadow is that I'm not enough, whatever the shadow is that you're dealing with. They tend to just kind of, I'll deal with that later, or they'll focus on helping someone else as a way to avoid focusing on that. And so that's why, again, I think sacred selfishness is very, very important. Writing about it, journaling about it, talking to a therapist about it, whatever it is that you have to do to pull that out of yourselves and honor all of our emotions.
Yeah.
I think anger can be an incredibly healthy and healing emotion.
Absolutely.
We've been taught a lot of incorrect things about forgiveness. I really do. I think when someone really wrongs you and they do it on purpose and with conscious, you know, and they repeat it, I just don't know that you have to forgive them.
I think the thing with forgiveness, and this is what I just realized recently, was I like to think of it more as acceptance and in many ways appreciation, because the fact of the matter is people do hurt us, especially if you're coming across, I've been in narcissistic relationships previously, which have really, you know, I've had boyfriends tell me that I'm fat and ugly and nobody's ever going to love me, and squashed my self-worth and squashed who I was. And I didn't realize till I went through this dark night why I was holding on to so many of these feelings and so many of these emotions. And then, like you said, it is the biggest blessing, because I came out at the start of this year and I felt like a completely different person. I felt like finally I discovered who I was, and finally I had managed to let go of all of that, because I was holding on to low self-worth. I was holding on to guilt and shame and all of these other emotions, which was my shadow side, which I didn't need to hold on to anymore. I just let it go. And I just said, you know what? You were put here for a purpose. And I've always said to my kids, what other people say about you is none of your business. What other people think about you is none of your business, because the fact of the matter is that they have their own journey to go on, and we have to learn to be in our own. We have to learn to be in our own power, to be able to be that powerful person that we're designed to be. And I think as empaths, we do tend to worry so much about what other people say about us. We tend to worry so much about what other people are thinking. We're people pleasers. Like you said, a lot of us grow up in narcissistic households where we're scared. We're scared to say something. What's interesting is I wasn't brought up in a narcissistic household, but I've been in narcissistic relationships. And, and there were times during my childhood where there was volatility. Just through teenage years, you go through a whole lot of stuff. So I think there are cases when you may not be brought up in the narcissistic household, but you go through those experiences. And when I talk about appreciation, I talk about, okay, it's not okay what that person did to me. It's not okay with how they treated me. But you know what? I appreciate the whole experience because it taught me to be the person that I am today. My extreme bullying at high school, same thing. It's like at that time it was devastating, but now it's allowed me to see me for who I am. So I think everything is like a learning journey, but I do agree with you. If somebody is going to continuously hurt you over and over again, and they know what they're doing and they're repeating the thing, then it's very difficult to move into that forgiveness phase.
Yeah. And I do want to say that if you're in a stage of your journey where you're not appreciating what you've been through, that's okay too.
That's okay too. Absolutely.
I had this really powerful moment years ago when I was with my best friend at the pool, and our kids were little and they were playing in the pool, and they were just, they were having a lot of fun, and we were like catching them and, there were these other kids in the pool who were just yelling, "Mommy, look at me, mommy, look," and they were just being very annoying. My friend and I were like, and we're catching our kids as they're jumping. And the mom is stretched out with sunglasses on and a stack of magazines and a little soda sipping next to her, and I was like, wow, and my friend said, her children are only acting out because they're not getting attention. And and we were in the pool with the kids, and I'm not saying we're like amazing mothers. I don't mean to paint that picture, but at that time, we were giving them it. We were focused on our kids, so they weren't acting out. And I remember having this thought, that's how all of our emotions are. If you give all of your emotions the time and attention that they are clamoring for, they won't get out of control. That includes anger, that includes frustration, fear. It includes all the negative emotions too. And you have to invite them all in. You have to give them all a space in your home, or they're just going to grow bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, I love how you say that, because I think that it is true. We have to acknowledge our emotions. We have to say it's okay. And like you said, if you're not in that place where you're ready to appreciate those experiences, that is 100% okay. That is 100% your journey. Because like I said, I didn't either until last year when I went through that time, when I went through that dark night. I didn't appreciate it either. I don't think I'd really uncovered a lot of it. It was, even then, so much so that as you go throughout life, then you start attracting the same people, right? If you don't deal with it and you don't heal from it, you start attracting.
It'll come over and over. And you might have to deal with it again and again and again in different layers as you're unwrapping and getting to the core of it, my former husband was shot in the line of duty by a really not nice person. And I worked really hard to forgive this person. I talked with some of his elementary school teachers. I talked with the DA who had, prosecuted him several times. And I tried to really understand him. And I thought, I got to this point where I think I can forgive him.
Yeah.
The shooting left my husband at the time with a brain injury that completely changed his personality. If you ever dealt with TBI, you guys out there will know it's very, very
Yeah.
painful for the person and for everyone around them. Changed him 100%, changed our marriage, changed everything. And I really felt that I had gotten to the point where I forgave this person who tried so hard to kill him. And about 2 years after, I thought, oh, look at me, I'm so spiritual, I've forgiven him. Like, look at this, is amazing. Something happened that reminded me that, he's still brain injured. And the first thing out of my mouth was, God damn you. And I said the man's name. And I was like,
Oh,
where did that come from? Like,
yeah.
I'm spiritual. I forgave him. And, no, I had to go through that again. And so I really think as an empath, but as any human being on this planet together, we just have to learn to love and trust and honor and accept ourselves wherever we are on on our path.
Absolutely, because we're all on different parts of our journey. And this is what, judgment in our society is so rife that we're so concerned with what other people are doing that we need to start to focus on, okay, what are our dreams? What are our goals? What are we wanting to move towards? Because especially as empaths, because we have been people pleasers for so long, and that's just our natural way of being, we tend to lose ourselves. We tend to forget about who we are. We forget about that vision that we have. And yet we know that being an empath can be a superpower. We know that being an empath allows you to connect with people on deep levels. And so how can we explain to people how they can learn to use empathy and being an empath as a superpower instead of seeing it as something that's kind of, because let's face it, there are as you say, the dark sides or the shadow sides, but how can we explain to people how they can actually start to empower themselves being an empath?
I can only speak from my experience, and what helped me to not be a people pleaser anymore and not care so much what people think and to set really healthy boundaries is I started to focus on what was important to me, what mattered to me, who mattered to me, who would I drop everything for in a hot second and be there for. And it was a pretty short list when I got down to it.
Yeah.
Really, it
Only your
was
kids,
family members, a couple of best friends, and my kids and my pets, and that was it. And I really looked at that list and I thought about it. And whenever anything would pop into my calendar, and can you do this? Can you do that? Can you show up for this? I would think about that list and I would say, well, if I say yes to this, will it affect people on my list? And if it would, I said no.
Yeah. And
No.
so self-care is actually really important too. And I've made it a real conscious effort to set some time aside now for myself, where it's just me, whether it's going on a walk by myself for an hour and just being able to connect with my higher self, being able to meditate, whatever it is. I've got a little meditation nook that people know do not disturb me in, because this is my space. And if I'm in there, then that's my time. Self-care is so important, right? For the empath to be able to just recalibrate and recuperate. And so what importance do you think self-care has?
Well, I think self-care is very important, not only for yourself and replenishing your own energy, but also for setting boundaries, because when you make yourself a priority, the boundaries naturally fall into place.
Absolutely.
And I think that's important. And something else that's important for people to remember is you can set a boundary and be terrified while you're setting it.
Yeah.
You can set a boundary and not even know if you want to set that boundary. You can set that boundary and break it and then set it again. But you've got to keep your eyes on the prize. And what is your goal with this boundary? And just keep at it and keep at it until it feels very, very natural and comes to you like second nature. Don't give up on those boundaries.
Absolutely. And it is something that you can learn. And the only reason why empaths struggle with it is because of the people-pleasing aspect, because we're afraid that we're going to, somebody's not going to love us if we set that boundary, or that they're going to be upset if we set that boundary. And especially if you're in these toxic relationships that we're talking about, because it's so volatile, then setting boundaries can be scary. But it's also incredibly important to do so, because if you don't, then that's when these people can chip away at you. This is when these people can take your energy. And, you know, empaths have so much to give and so much to help others with, that are going to appreciate them, that are going to put time into them too. And I think it's important as empaths that we go, okay, you know, relationships are two-sided. So is this person bringing as much into my life as what I'm bringing into theirs? And if they're not, then they're not people that you need to be spending time with, because this is the thing. We often overgive. We'll say yes to everything, and we say no to very little. So I think that as empaths, I think it's really powerful to learn how to say no, and also to learn that we don't have to say yes to everything.
Exactly. And sometimes very kind people will ask us to do things. It doesn't have to be an energy vampire, you know, and you still have to say no to them sometimes, not all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. If it doesn't fit in with what you need to do as well, and you need to think about whether it's actually going to, you know, whether it's actually for your best good as well.
Yeah.
And so wow, that's really cool. So I'm really glad that we went into this today, because I think it's important for empaths to understand that, yeah, empathy is really powerful when it comes to connection. Empathy is really powerful when it comes to being able to read people that are around you, as I told you with the story, to be able to figure out who's good for your life and who's a good connection to be around. So if you learn to manage your energies and you learn to protect yourself with boundaries, and also with cord cutting, because I think this is something that codependents have issues with, is that the cords are attached, the energetic cords are still attached to these particular people. Have you done much work with cord cutting?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I do cord cutting a lot. And I think it's important for people to remember, with cord cutting, it is not a one and done. You know, especially if it's a very entrenched relationship, you're going to have to cut that cord again and again and again.
Yeah.
But sometimes you'll get cool signs. You know, I did a cord cutting meditation just last week, and I was wearing a long, thick silver, solid silver chain with not a heavy crystal on it. It was a little orange kyanite. And I finished the cord cutting, and I always ask Archangel Michael to kind of swoop in and make sure it's done. And I got up from my little meditation spot, and I walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water, and the chain broke in half around my neck.
Okay.
And I don't mean where the clasp was. I mean, like, literally right. And I was like, oh, okay, I get it. It's done.
Yeah, it's done. And the thing is, when you do that, there is a sense of relief, isn't there? Like, because sometimes, like, some signs very quickly, some signs that you may have that energetic cord attached, and cord cutting could come in useful for those empaths, is when somebody is constantly on your mind, when you're unable to, because I found that with some of the energy vampires I've been around, even just thinking about them creates that emotion, that negative energy. So so what could be some signs that maybe some cord cutting would be necessary?
Well, I think what you said, I mean, if you feel drained around a certain person, if they're on their mind, if they're on your mind, if they show up in your dreams. And what will happen sometimes is you'll do the cord cutting, and then they'll call you because they have subconsciously felt it, and they're trying to record with you.